Hi, good evening. It's another beautiful day, and like I used to say, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching from across the world. My name is Femi Owoyele, and I'm your host this evening on another edition of Nation Building Series. The last time we've had a few sessions before now, and this is another session, and I hope and I want to believe it will be another great one, impactful as usual. I want to believe that the previous editions have been maybe enlightening, have provided a level of balance with regards to political education. I also want to believe that the previous editions have added value in different ways that you might want to say it has. I want to believe previous editions have provided a level of understanding on issues around politics, issues around governance, issues around responsibility as citizens, issues around, well, maybe I will say basic understanding of engagement or systems of engagement with politics, with policies, and understanding our roles. So I just want to believe that this has been real. Thanks for joining Source of Joy on Instagram. So before we fire on, I'd like to reiterate that first, you can join on Instagram at Fowoyele and on Facebook Femi Owoyele Profile. Thanks for joining in, ma. Fumilayo Majekodumi Adeyemi. Thank you so much, man. Good to see you. Source of Joy, thank you. I've seen you. As you join, I would recognize if opportunity permits, and if not, please just understand that I see everyone that will be joining as we move on. So this evening, it's we'll be taking a leap off the issues we've dealt with in the last few weeks, and then this time around we'll be looking at something a bit different, and it is central to our entire system of governance. It is presidential system or parliamentary system. So we'll be doing what I call a comparative analysis. So I'll try my best to do justice to the issues. We'll look at the features of each of them. We'll look at the advantages and disadvantages. We'll look at what they actually have to offer. Then we'll domesticate it into the Nigerian context, analyzing our experiences in time past with regards to, I think, parliamentary system, and then current reality, which is the presidential system. Have we fared better? Is there an alternative to the system that we can actually maximize to give us the best when it comes to effective governance, when it comes to issues of impact of government? So those are the issues that we'll be looking at, and I want to believe that as we move on, this time around we might also take opinions, because these are issues that really bother Nigerians, as it were. So let's move on straight away. As you join in, like I said, I will be recognizing you, and if not, please let's just move on, because we also have limited time. So what is parliamentary system of government? What is presidential system of government? Okay, so what I will start by saying that the two systems have become most frequent in the last few decades, and there are other structures and systems of government across board, but these two have been very frequent in the last few decades. Well, apparently because they appear to solve a lot of issues of how to manage interest, how to manage the state. They appear to be systems that deal appropriately with issues around leadership, governance, and people. Thank you for joining, Dr. Akinola. I can see you on Instagram. So apparently, because this is a system, or these are systems that have proven over time to have been effective when it comes to issues of governance. So without wasting time at all, like I said, parliamentary system of government is primarily, I'll just analyze the features this way, saying that the head of government is different from the head of state. That is one on one side. Also, parliamentary system of government is a system of government where there is relatively a fusion of powers between the executive and the legislature. Well, I will explain as we move on, compared to presidential system. Presidential system, on the other hand, emphasizes a situation where the head of government is also the head of state. So one person has full executive power at that level. Also, there is what we call separation of power. In the presidential system, you have the executive arm of government different from the legislative arm of government, different from the judiciary. So the two are not as fused as they are in a parliamentary system of government. So of course we'll look at how this operates, and so like I said, it won't be like we are teaching we are doing a secondary school class. We'll be looking at issues as we look at differences. So a parliamentary system of government also emphasizes what we call collective responsibility. So in a parliamentary system of government, you have the executive, or you have issues that borders on the executive being attended to, or being where the entire executive council take full responsibility for any acts or omission, commission of any member of the executive. So that's what we call collective responsibility, as against individual responsibility that the presidential system is known for. So a minister or a ministry, as it were, is responsible, or a minister is responsible for the activities of that ministry, and when there are issues, that ministry can be held accountable. That's why we call it individual responsibility. Also, if you look at that, issues of individual responsibility also borders on the president himself. The president has total responsibility, is answerable on all issues around executive matter, unlike a parliamentary system of government where the council of ministers have to respond collectively on issues like that. So those are just like general basic differences, but we'll look further beyond, and we'll take these issues one after the other. So excuse me. So I said there is fixed term. Okay, there is also a fixed term of office with no removal plan, except for maybe where there is an issue of gross misconduct when it comes to presidential system of government. So you have, for example, Nigeria and the United States, where you have 4-year term of office, and you have the opportunity, you have 2 terms. As an individual, you have the opportunity to go for 2 terms. That is what operates in a presidential system of government. So you have a clear-cut number of years that you're running for office for. But in a parliamentary system of government, you can be in government for as long, executive now, for as long as you enjoy the majority control of the prime minister. This time around has majority, is the head of the party that has the majority members of the house. So the party is the one that determines literally who the prime minister becomes, because ultimately it is the person who the ruling party, as it were, or the majority party in the house, then becomes the prime minister. The prime minister is primarily just the first among equals. So unlike the president that has wide range of influence, before you could become a president, you would have to, for example, in the Nigerian case, you will have to contest elections and win elections. For example, at least 25% of votes in at least 2/3 of the entire state. So in that situation, you see that the president has to really contest everywhere, has to really show his dominance, his popularity at different levels. But the prime minister only has the responsibility to contest in his constituency. And that is why you will see that, of course, when we will get there, you will see the reasons why a lot of people, especially people who understand these two systems of government, have advocated for Nigeria a parliamentary system of government. But that's notwithstanding, we'll get there, like I said. So all this that I've done is just to give like a basic understanding of the differences that occur between these two. So, but let me push further on the issues of fixed term of office with no clear-cut plan for removal. Of course, under a presidential system of government, there is a plan or is constitution. There is a constitutional provision for removal of the president, because we have president in a presidential system of government, but it's called the impeachment process. Now, for example, in the Nigerian Constitution, Section 143 declares or clears out all that the impeachment process takes. Now, you will see how difficult it becomes. For example, you need to have members, 1/3 of the entire members of the National Assembly. National Assembly includes the House of Representatives and the Senate. You will have to get at least 1/3 of these entire members sign a notice for impeachment. Now, after that, you will need the leadership of the House to send a notice to the president. Now, you send a notice to the president that this, of course, it must also be on the basis of gross misconduct. Now, what is gross misconduct? Gross misconduct really is a grievous offense as defined or by the National Assembly, because they will need to now say, oh, this is beyond what we can undo. This is beyond constitutional provision. This is indeed gross misconduct. So by the time it gets to that level, you begin to see the entire process becoming so wieldy, becoming so impossible, because a president that has emerged with 23rd, with larger percentage of the entire votes, would need at least 2/3 majority, as in towards the end of the entire process, after setting up the panel to investigate, a panel of people with unquestionable character. Even if the panel finds him guilty, there will still be a vote of the National Assembly, the two houses, where they will need to obtain 2/3 majority to vote for impeachment. So, long story cut short, all I'm saying is that the process of impeachment in a presidential system of government is actually very stringent, and that's why it's been very difficult, almost impossible in many cases, to have a president impeached. Democracies across the world, even in the US. Of course, you saw President Donald Trump was impeached at different times, but you will see that the impeachment process could not entirely physically take him out of office because of this cumbersome process, as it were. So the president relatively enjoys a fixed term of office. At least will run his 4 years on a good day, and then possibly get another 4 years if he wins the next election. So that's what happens with the president. So there is focus. He has the opportunity to run an agenda. He also comes in with his agenda, because don't forget, he's the head of state and the head of government, unlike in a parliamentary system. In a parliamentary system, all you need to leave the office as a prime minister is just a vote of no confidence of the parliament. And this often happens, especially where, apart from losing the majority, the confidence of the majority of the members of the House, of the parliament, you can, as a prime minister, also be outwitted easily. Even based on not something you would say, unlike presidential system of government, where you say gross misconduct. You can actually be taken off the system in a parliamentary system without committing an act that is tagged gross misconduct. It could be a political issue, and you are out once you lose. That's why you call it vote of confidence or vote of no confidence. So we move on straight away. Now, we talked about, in a presidential system of government, we say the Constitution is supreme. The Constitution is supreme. So you have the rule of law, you have the entire process. But usually, even though it's not openly admitted, in a parliamentary system of government, the parliament is actually supreme. The parliament determines who becomes what and how it goes. Now, how is the parliament constituted? The executive members of the executive of the government, every member of the executive are not directly members of the parliament. So what I'm saying is, there's a legislative arm of government, that's a lawmaking body. In Nigeria, we have the House of Reps and the, the Senate. as the legislative arm. But in a parliamentary system, you have the legislative arm. Now, those who become the executive, that's the prime minister and his ministers and the entire cabinet, usually are taken from the parliament. That is the major difference. So there is the executive is separate from the legislature. Members of the executive are first members of the legislature. So they are taken from amongst them to have a council or a cabinet to run the affairs of the, and that's why I talked about the fusion that happens. So a parliamentary system has a fusion, or if you call it fusion of power, as against separation of power in a presidential system of government. Also, another very important thing I'd like you to note is that how did presidential system of government even evolve? Presidential system of government is, I would say, is the baby of the United States of America. And how do you say it? After the Americans actually invented the system in 1987 to replace their decade-old frame system of confederacy. Don't forget that America had emerged as a confederacy of 13 colonies originally. So confederation means that there is a loose center. So each of the regions are actually powerful, have control, have influence, and have control over the region. So the center is actually very weak. So when that reality came on board, the American statesmen came together and said that we cannot hold a state, especially coming from where they were coming from. Don't forget, they were colonized by British and they got their independence. At that level, they needed a strong center. They needed a president that is forward thinking. They needed an executive that can hold its own and lead the charge for the nation. And that was how they created. So it was fashioned out of a need. I like you to pay attention. The presidential system of government, as it were, did not just emerge like, oh, some philosophers just came together and drew out a system. No, it was fashioned from a position of a need to solve the problem of a people. That's the American people. And that's how, of course, presidential system of government started trending as a way to organize and to manage states. Now, I would not want to waste so much time on these differences because our focus is the Nigerian state. We would like to look at how has the Nigerian state fared in these differences, which actually is the preferred option for a state like Nigeria. And I would like to start by saying that Nigeria did not start out with a presidential system of government, even as an independent state. So at independence, Nigeria also borrowed the system, or were naturally, by virtue of colonialism, adopted the system of its colonial master, that is Britain, which was the Westminster. Westminster is another word for the parliamentary system. So I can see everybody joining. Fred Adetiba, thank you, sir. Ches Vosak, thank you. I am Isaac Chibike Jr. Thanks for joining. Adenuga Samuel, Francis Owoyele. A lot of people have joined. I've seen you all. Thank you so much. Okonkwo Victor Afa Mefuna. Thank you so much for joining. So let's keep on going. Now, having tried the Westminster system and having faced military intervention in 1966, which of course the military were in power up until 1979, where democracy came back to the front line in Nigeria. Nigerians observed clearly that the system that they needed at the time was a system that does not harbor institutional opposition. That's one thing I didn't mention earlier. In a presidential system of government, opposition is usually not given, opposition party now is usually not given its place in government. Does not have, so the government is the government of the ruling party. That is how it goes. Unlike in a parliamentary system of government where, like I said, there's a fusion of power. In fact, there is an official opposition system. with him. Don't forget that every member of the parliament actually dictates the tune for the executive, unlike in a presidential system of government where the executive could literally say there's separation of power and we can run our affairs and all that. Of course, it's not absolute separation of power because there's a system called checks and balances. But before I lose, the point I'm making is that there is what is called institutional opposition. So Nigeria at the time wanted a system that does not harbor institutional opposition, a system where there's a president that will command respect. And that's why, don't forget that even in the constitution, even in the 1979 constitution, there was the provision that the president that would emerge must have at least 25% of total votes cast in at least 2/3 of all the states. So that makes him not just popular, it gives him a reasonable level of legitimacy to ride and to say that, oh, he is an or she is an accepted candidate to lead. Everybody have assessed him, and based on this, there is an overwhelming majority that gives him. So that mindset was one of the things that produced, so Nigeria began to follow through the path of the American system, so abandoning the Westminster or the British parliamentary system, especially in the second. But there's beyond all these plus or minus, for and against and all that, there's a general perception, and that's the focus of this discourse, because it's beyond, oh, which one is good, which one is better, what is the characteristics of this, what is the characteristics of that. It's beyond that. Now, what is the general perception? There's not so much about the suitability or workability of either parliamentary or presidential system. Not so much argument about that. Reason is that people are primarily after result, effectiveness of a system that delivers values, a system that delivers quality governance, a system that respects and honors integrity, that respects human rights, and that gives equality, that provides room for people to fulfill their individual and collective purposes. So naturally, Nigerians are not necessarily, like every other state, driving for parliamentary or presidential. The need or the argument for and against these systems is born out of the problems that we face, and that's why I like us to pay attention. That's why I had to move away from the issues around characteristics and advantages and disadvantages to the core issues. So the issue that the presidential system of government has really brought to the front burner for many Nigerians and for statesmen is the issue of cost of governance. No doubt about it, the presidential system of government is more expensive to manage, is more expensive to run. Naturally, it's also a system that the kind of people that would appreciate and maximize its potential are enlightened people. So because you would be able to look at your cost and all these things, you'll be able to check excesses, you'll be able to have a system that regulates affairs and all that. So the issue or the real issue for agitation, especially against the presidential system of government for Nigeria, is around the cost of governance. No doubt, when compared to a parliamentary system of government, presidential system of government, like I said, is expensive to manage. And that's why Nigeria being a monoculture economy, monoculture means it's largely dependent on one major source of revenue. I mean, the petroleum, you know what I mean by monoculture now. So we largely, our productivity with regards to revenue generation is largely dependent on the oil revenue. So when you look at those realities and when you look at the need, the enormous need of a Nigerian nation, the people and all that. Thanks for joining, Taiwo Moses, Wande Gwadebo. I can see all of you, Smith, Aremo, Abiola. Thanks for joining. So by the time you look at the unwieldy demand of a presidential system on this mono-economic system, you begin to wonder, I mean, how we can actually, or how we've been sustaining it. And a lot of people have said that we cannot sustain it for too long. Why? Because, for example, so because, for example, the Nigerian state has a volatile economic variations. Now, look at it. You have a president that has at least 40 hits, special assistants, senior special assistants, special advisors. You have about 42 there, about ministers. You have, and all of them have at least 12 staffs, and then a budget. So by the time you look at the entire system and the demand on the system, and then you look at billions and billions allocated annually just to manage the people elected to serve, then you begin to ask questions around how sustainable is this system? How sustainable? For example, the 2021 budget had about 134 billion naira allocated for the National Assembly. I mean, you can imagine that weight in the midst of a budget that is not more than 13 trillion naira and all that. So a lot of people have had issues with cost of governance, and that has been the driving issues. And of course, there have been efforts to review and to see how we can make things better. So during the President Jonathan's tenure, there was Presidential Advisory Committee headed by T.Y. Danjuma, and then they came up with a recommendation. And what were the recommendations? Number one, they said instead of having the number of ministers that we have across board, we should have 18 instead of about 42 ministers. And 18 should just be regionally based, so you have 3 from each region, regardless of the issues around state. It's just to rework our constitution to accommodate this so that it can reduce. Then state agencies, some ministries can be merged for effectiveness and for productivity, instead of creating an unwieldy amount of ministries, agencies, parastatals that, of course, we know they are created to serve purpose, but in a situation where we do not have the capacity to do that, that if we want to sustain a presidential system of government, we can look at harmonizing these issues because we must, in whether we like it or not, reduce the cost of governance. Another thing they came up with was the issue of maybe instead of 360 members of the House of Representatives, can we reduce to 180? I mean, let's half it and let's see how effective it is. Oh, you would say that, but these 360 House of Reps represent constituencies, and these constituencies fulfill constitutional provisions. We made the constitution, we can review the constitution. So what stops, I mean, according to the report, I mean, there was a provision or a suggestion, a recommendation rather, for a situation where we can delineate the entire country back into a system where you just have, for example, a number, maybe 10 or less numbers, or maybe 5 this time around, 5 House of Representatives members from every state. Then you have, instead of 3 senators, you could have just 2 senators from every state. Of course, you will say, oh, but there is northwest, this state is divided into central, east, and west, or central, north, and south. We can redesign the state structure to accommodate, so you can divide a whole state into 2 senatorial districts, then have 2 senators represent. So all these things are just methods or mechanisms to check the excesses of a presidential system of government. Also, they looked at, okay, if we want to sustain the system as we have it now, can we have a 35% cut in the entire allocation, including salaries, that goes to the National Assembly members? Those are other options. So there are a lot of options that were proposed or that are looked at, and those are like way forward to sustaining a presidential system of government for a country like Nigeria, with its own realities and its own challenges. And those challenges that I said it earlier is that our productivity in terms of having what we need to solve our problem is low. Revenue generation, I don't want to say that is a poor nation, but in relative terms, we are still struggling to meet our basic needs. So at that level, we cannot be struggling with a system that is also siphoning or that is not even solving matter in any way. And that's why we are a number of recommendations for sustaining if we must sustain a presidential system of government have come forth. Can we cut the cost of governance? Can we review the entire structure? Can we review our federalism? What and how can we maximize what we have if we must sustain a presidential system of government? The second one, of course, there's also the serious need to undertake a systemic review of the present democratic model, of course, which captures the entire thing I've said. But in any way, if we want to look at it that, okay, is a parliamentary option a possibility? Can Nigeria actually shift or move away from presidential system of government to a parliamentary system of government? And what are the bases for that? Now, we have the issues around Nigeria being a diverse ethnic and a country with diverse ethnic nationalities. You have interests, so many interests, and so there is mutual suspicion at different levels. Then in a parliamentary system of government, don't forget political power is diffused. So unlike centralized, where you have a president that determines or that has his own agenda, manifesto, and then runs it, political power in the parliamentary system of government is diffused. The prime minister only campaigns in his own constituency, like every other member of the parliament. And that's what makes it beautiful, such that instead of spending about, like the last election in Nigeria, we had 242 billion naira spent on that election. Because, of course, don't forget, that is official figure. By the time you look at party campaigns and all these things, you begin to see weight of corruption, weight of spendings that could be avoided if it was a parliamentary system of government. Because there will be no need for a president to travel the 36 states to do banners and posters in everywhere. The prime minister will only contest in his own constituency, just like every other member of the parliament. So you will just focus on that. I mean, like I said, it's also just first among equal. Secondly, you also have the issues of the process being very cheap to manage. You also have issues of, thanks for joining us, Kudus Davis. Thanks a lot. So you have issues of fusion of executive, and so you're not paying some or allocating some 134 billion to the National Assembly separate, then the ministries and the ministers to have another unwieldy allocation separate. Don't forget I said that in a system that is in a parliamentary system, the executive and the legislature are the same people. So the system is integrated. Then a parliamentary system of government, because of the structure, also aids speedy decision-making process and implementation process. And that's a beautiful advantage. And then you begin to see that bills are usually debated. We struggle to even take a policy from bill to implementation and all that. Titayo, thanks for joining in, ma. So you look at all these frustrations of a presidential system of government, especially where in a country where what we drag over are low level interest or where you should talk about development, we are talking about politics. We are looking, instead of allocating a project and making sure that it's completed, you are looking at the fact that, oh, they've not allocated to my own constituency, so therefore we must make sure that they don't take too much. So there are interest here and there and all that. So those frustrations, we take it up on the system. And that's why, like I said, the parliamentary system of government had the advantage of ensuring that there is a level of equality. There's a level of course, issues around minority being dominated by a majority can easily be addressed and all that. So you look at parliamentary system of government as a simple mechanism for deposing the parliament too. So those are like advantages and disadvantages. But beyond this, we must decide which way we want to go. Like I said, and this is more like a summary, if we want a presidential system of government, we must make it work. We must review our federal structure. We must ensure that cost of governance is drastically reduced. We must, one way or the other, readjust the entire process of sustaining leaders at different levels. Secondly, if we want a parliamentary system of government, we will need to, of course, take out the constitution and start afresh. But these are just options that I have put before you based on the advantages and disadvantages of this system, and I've also put before you the peculiarity of the Nigerian state. So I'd like to have maybe one or two comments about which way do you think, because I've said a lot. I've been able to establish the differences between the two systems of government. I've been able to open our understanding to the advantages and disadvantages too. We've also looked at the Nigerian state and the fact that the presidential system of government not working is not exclusively because it is a presidential system of government and it does not fit us as a people, but primarily it is our approach and how we have been implementing our own model of presidential system of government. And don't forget, the main focus around these issues is the process, the unwieldy process of making decision, the issues of governance and all that. So I'd like to have one or two comments either from Instagram or Facebook about what do you think, which way. Maybe we can even have like a mini vote. Do you think a presidential system of government as we have it is still sustainable? If yes, maybe we can have one or two opinions on what else can be done. Apart from the things I had stated earlier, what else can we do to review this? Secondly, is a parliamentary system the way to go? Or our problem is not even all these systems. Our problem, of course, like some people want to say, is just leadership. But even leadership, this system determines how leadership emerges. So we cannot entirely just pin it on that. We must also review our system and our constitution. So I'll give room for maybe one or two opinions, one or two suggestions, and then we can then start wrapping it up. Thanks for joining in, Olori Melo. Good to see you. Majegede Ibrahim, I can see you. Ridwan Sulaiman Odeke, I can see you. Ayo Miami, Honorable, I can see you. Thanks for joining in, everyone. So, like I said, Awula Olusegun, good to see you, sir. So we for those that are just joining now, I'll just do a recap. We've established the advantages, the characteristics of presidential system of government. We've also established that of parliamentary system of government. We have looked at the fact that there is fixed term of office and a sense of focus of leadership, for the executive arm in a presidential system of government, where the government comes in with popular support from the people, having emerged through a national election to become the president. Then he becomes the head of state and the head of government, and then he has individual responsibility. More like the president is really powerful. Unlike a parliamentary system of government where, okay, there's a suggestion now. I think the problem is not the system of government per se, but really it's a problem of orientation and political socialization. That's from Read One. Good one. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's a good one. So, like I said, it's not so much about the system, but sometimes too, if we must change a situation, we may need to review the structure, and that's why we are putting the two systems. So like I was saying, thank you for that point. I really appreciate it. So I said parliamentary on the other hand, there is fusion. The same members, the entire ministers like we have it today, are direct members of the parliament, that means the legislature. So you don't have separate arm, they are separate, but they are not separate in terms of individuals and personalities. So the same members of the parliament, from among them emerge the executive. And then I told you about the process, the party with the majority members of the house. Sometimes there can be collaboration. Okay, there's another opinion here. Kudus Davis. In my opinion, let me look through that. Kudus Davis, in my opinion, the way forward is to design the system that best suits our society without taking recourse to any existing model. Beautiful. Either from USA or Britain. We have once operated a regional system. We have once operated a regional system which had been adjudged the best so far in our political history. Therefore, regional system could be adopted. Oh, that's a beautiful one. Femi Ojomo, thanks for joining in. Wizzy Speaks, thanks for joining. HR had 3X, thanks for joining in. Oh, that's another lovely one. So Kudus Davis is saying that rather than just model our system around a United States structure or a British structure, we should understand our own realities, peculiarities, and fashion out a system that works for us. But don't forget that, like I said, beautiful point, because even the presidential system of government, I said it earlier, emerged from the United States after they had a problem with their confederacy in 1787. They had a loose confederal system. The center was very weak, so they were not able to channel their strength. So they came back, their statesmen came down and drafted a system that works for them. And that's how presidential system of government came up. So we also, like Kudus is saying now, is that we should also look inward and sit down together. And that's why there's been argument for and against federalism, regionalism, and all that. That maybe that works for us, considering our spread, our ethnic differences, and others. So I'd like to have like 2 more opinions before we wrap it up. But while waiting for opinions also on this, I will still continue my summary for those who joined in late. So we were able to look at the fact that in a presidential system of government, there is individual responsibility. The president is directly responsible for what the executive does. That not only that, every minister answers for his or her ministry. But in a parliamentary system of government, one minister or one misbehavior from a member of the cabinet can make the entire, there is collective responsibility. So there is collective answering to issues, collect. So if there is collective commendation, there can be collective punishment. And then a parliamentary system of government can be removed. The government does not enjoy that confidence of having a fixed term. So when it loses favor through what we call a vote of no confidence with the parliament, even on mere political issues, the cabinet can be removed. Don't forget, they are also still members of the parliament. And we also look at the fact that there is fusion of power, but also in presidential system of government where there is separation of power, there is a system called checks and balances, where the executive is subjected to the scrutiny of the legislature. And sometimes, and that is one of the disadvantages of this system, sometimes and most times it looks as though they are always in conflict because of issues around interest. Unlike in a parliamentary system of government, you hardly have issues because they are the same side of people, and there's a system that regulates their affairs. So one more opinion before we wrap it up. Thanks for joining in. I've seen a lot of people join, and I'd like to really appreciate you. We just want to take one more suggestion on which way to go, especially for Nigeria, before we move on. Shomi Balogun, thanks for joining. Okay, if we don't have, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call it a day. Thanks for joining. For all those that have joined, I want to believe that we've not taken a position on whether we should go presidentialism or we should go parliamentarianism. The only thing we've been able to do, we've looked at which way. If we must retain a presidential system of government, we must, as a matter of urgency, review the mechanism. We must review the process. We must review the entire structure, especially when it comes to the issues of cutting cost of governance. That is one. If we must also move to parliamentary system of government, we must start looking at the advantages and how we can achieve that. But don't forget, ultimately, it boils down to leadership. Ultimately, whether one goes through or not is also about leadership. How we achieve this is also about leadership. And then orientation, like Ridwan mentioned earlier, is also very key. So we must be willing to drive our opinion. We must also do beyond that to ensuring that leadership takes its full responsibility to making Nigeria better than it has been, and the fact that we can actually move away from this. Thank you so much for joining in. I hope that one way or the other we've had one or two things that we've learned. I'd like to call it a day. Have a beautiful week, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining me. God bless you all.